When Luke Skywalker took Grogu from Din Djarin, the Jedi would evaluate the foundling, both of his connection to the Force, and if he was too old to become a Jedi again. With the guidance of Ahsoka Tano, Luke would attempt to train Grogu on Ossus, but he began to wonder if Grogu really wanted to be a Jedi. A visit from Din Djarin confirmed Grogu had struggles with attachment, so Luke decided to give him a choice before he advanced any further with his training. If Grogu chose the Mandalorian, he would be in breach of the Jedi Code, but if he remained, he would be the first student in the Academy and a great Jedi under Luke Skywalker, but he might never see Djarin again. Grogu ultimately chose his bond with the Mandalorians, but what if he chose the path of the Jedi? How would this affect Grogu and the new Jedi Order? Would the Mandalorians be able to defeat Moff Gideon? Luke watched as Grogu waddled from side to side, and even without the Force, he knew his attachment to the Mandalorian was waging an internal war with his Jedi teachings. After what seemed an eternity, Grogu levitated the green lightsaber into the air, and Luke declared him to be the first Jedi of his new academy. With the help of R2-D2 and the androids, Grogu was escorted to his new makeshift quarters, whilst Luke remained in the stone structure. Having seen Grogu's memories of Order 66, the Jedi wondered if he had forced Grogu into his decision, and his reason for choosing the Jedi was for the wrong reasons. Luke was aware of what had happened to Anakin, and it had been his desire to save Padme and others that had led to his downfall, so he vowed to ensure he wouldn't make the same mistakes. As Ahsoka had told him, Luke needed to trust in his instincts, and his instincts told him that Grogu would make for a great Jedi. Luke walked out of the building, and he saw Grogu helping the androids to levitate the stone bricks, so he decided to challenge Grogu, just as Yoda had done all those years ago on Dagobah. Grogu would adopt different poses and endure the distractions of R2-D2 before Luke was satisfied with the day's training, but as the night fell, Luke sensed a disturbance from the Academy's newest student. The Master hurried to the quarters of Grogu, and he saw his student was convulsing, so he used the Force to calm him down. Luke could see the signs of a Force vision, and with the consent of Grogu, he managed to see his old homeworld of Tatooine and flickering images of pain and suffering. The Jedi had previously been guilty of acting on these visions, and as Yoda had reminded him, there was no guarantee that they held the truth. As he looked at Grogu struggling from discomfort, Luke felt as if he owed him to act on the vision, as he had just taken him away from someone who had adopted him. Whilst the New Republic considered Tatooine as part of its territory, Luke knew that the planet was largely governing itself, and he would have to be cautious if they were to directly interfere. Without wasting any more time, Luke took Grogu into his X-Wing, but instructed him to not leave the ship, both to keep him safe and to also test if he could let go of his bond to Din Djarin. When the Jedi landed on Tatooine, Luke left Grogu in the hands of Peli Motto, whilst he put his hood over his head and covertly moved around Mos Eisley to acquire a speeder. Around the perimeter of Mos Eisley's Chalmun Cantina, Luke would spot several Pike guards exchanging spice, and after overhearing their plans in Mos Espa, he subtly used the Force to knock them out. To anyone passing through the cantina, such behaviour was normal, and Luke was able to take one of the Pike's land speeders to venture out of Mos Eisley. Using his vast knowledge of the planet, Luke reached the outskirts of the civilization of Mos Espa when he sensed an echo in the Force. The Jedi abandoned the speeder in a corner of the exterior fencing of the town and utilised a Force-enhanced leap to jump onto the roof of one of the homes. Surveying the area from a height, Luke quickly distinguished the Duros bounty hunter Cad Bane, and standing opposite him were Fennec Shand and the survivor of the Sarlacc Boba Fett. As the Daimyo and Shan retreated to the ruins of Gorsa's sanctuary, Luke masked his presence with the Force and moved from rooftop to rooftop until he felt the echo return. As Luke felt the battle was yet to begin, he dropped down from the roof and ducked into the building he had stood on top of, and immediately he was hit by the echo of Anakin Skywalker. Memories of building C-3PO, interactions with Shmi, and accidental uses of the Force rushed back to Luke and caused him to stumble out of the door. Luke's reverie was disturbed by mechanical clicking from nearby, and he saw the Pikes readying a 4th degree Scorponek droid. Before the Pike sensed its presence, Luke returned to his previous location, and before the deflector shield generator was activated, he controlled the direction of the twin laser cannons and focused them onto the pike foot soldiers. Luke saw Boba Fett trying to prevent the town from any further damage, so he turned the Scorponok droid away from the pikes and onto the second droid of its kind as well as the Trandoshans. Whilst Luke had swung the battle in favour of Boba Fett and Din Djarin, he sensed that there was something else on Tatooine, so he leapt off of Anakin's old hut and jumped back onto his speeder. As the sound of the celebration from the mods and the grunt of protest from the pikes both receded into Tatooine's sands, the Force guided him back towards Mos Eisley. The echo of Anakin returned to Luke, so he brushed his hand across the scorched surface and discovered what had happened to the Tusken Raiders, from their capture of Shmi to Anakin's Darkside massacre. Luke would have been surprised had he not known what Anakin had become, but what definitely surprised him was the ghost of Anakin standing behind him. Even as a projection in the Force, Luke saw remorse in the ghost, but rather than blaming him for what had happened, he asked Anakin how he should train Grogu. Anakin pointed to the evidence of his massacre, then wisely told Luke to look at how the Jedi had failed, and instead of correcting their mistakes, he should take his own path. As Anakin's ghost faded into the sands, Luke was skeptical of what Anakin had told him. His Jedi teachings had told him the dangers of attachment, and here was a Jedi who had fallen because of the rule, implying that he should now be accepted. Just as Luke was about to get into his speeder, he was interrupted by a sound overhead, and he looked to find his own X-Wing hovering above him. Luke shook his head as Grogu peered into view, and the Jedi realised that he must now follow Anakin's advice and travel to Jabba's palace. When Luke entered the hidden hangar of Jabba's palace, Din Djarin was preparing to leave in his customised M1 starfighter, and the Mandalorian turned to see Luke, R2-D2 and Grogu. Djarin knew that with his own desire to redeem himself by bathing in the living waters of Mandalore, the visits to Grogu would be limited, but he knew that he needed someone to teach him to control the Force. Leaving Djarin to his mission, Luke and Grogu returned to Ossus and his training would resume. Having spent several decades hardly using the Force, Grogu was trained in the control, sense and alter abilities again, but more importantly his discipline, and this enabled him to wield an initiate's training lightsaber. Whilst Grogu was progressing in his training, Din Djarin was making equally good progress with his own mission. With the knowledge that Grogu would be safe, Djarin could focus on his own mission to become a Mandalorian again, and had travelled to Nevarro. High Magistrate Karga was skeptical about Djarin's plans to revive IG-11, and without Grogu, he struggled to find any ideas to rebuild the droid, especially with the damaged memory circuit. Given the loyalty and sacrifice made by IG-11, the Mandalorian wasn't going to give up so easily, so he made a return to the Adelphi base. Djarin found Captain Carson Tava at his usual spot in the outpost, and the pilot directed him to the world of Mechis 3, which was located on the Corellian trade route. The world that had once belonged to the Techno Union was almost devoid of life, except for a few brave scavengers and salvage droids, and the Mandalorian was as out of place here as he had been on Nevarro. His experience with battle droids in the Clone War had made Djarin hate droids, but having seen IG-11, his surroundings on Mechis 3 gave him an idea. R5-D4 surveyed the abandoned factories and shipyards, and it found a nearby IG assassin droid factory that had closed after the Clone War. Djarin easily found the memory circuit he was looking for, and with any other parts that looked useful, he returned to Nevarro and helped the Anzellan droidsmiths. What they had created was an upgrade on IG-11, and Djarin was now ready to become a Mandalorian again. Travelling to the world of Kelevara, the Mandalorian stepped into the castle of Clan Kryze and approached the disheartened Bo-Katan. Djarin announced that he had found an entire sleeping army on Mechis 3, and with the Darksaber in his possession, it was up to him to take over Mandalore. That is it for part 1 of this What If. If you'd like to see a part 2 or any other What If, feel free to leave your suggestions in the comment section below. Thank you for watching and see you next time.